Hello, this is EE380. My name is Dennis Allison, and today we have Stephanie Lepp as a speaker. This is now November 21st, 2020. The context right today is we have just completed the presidential election, which was won by Joe Biden and disputed by President Trump. And things are still in a bit of a mess. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and life is continuing. In any case, today Stephanie is going to talk about some of the work she's done. She's a Palo Alto artist. I found her through my friend Jeff Goodfellow, who runs a list of things that you ought to look at for some of us. And she apparently had been interviewed, or at least someone in a newspaper in England had seen her work and had written a short article, which Jeff had snipped out and sent around to his friends. So this is actually motivated by a newspaper article published in England about the U.S. Artist Stephanie Lepp.
I wonder what article it was. Interesting.
If you wish, Stephanie, I can send you a copy.
Yeah, I'm curious. I also this you might not know about me. I'm also actually a Stanford graduate, so this is a sweet little, kind of a homecoming here.
Well, that, and also you work for you've been working at the Institute for the Future.
Yes.
And this is an SRI spin out of some time ago.
Right.
Many had done work with them, and it's one of the premier organizations for predicting the future. So you're a futurist as well as an artist, which is, well, some of us think that that's the normal way things ought to be done.
Yeah, they go hand in hand.
In any case, what Jeff said and what the article I saw said is that you have been using some of the recent technology for inserting people into videos and having them say what you want them to say and not what they actually. This sort of agitprop stuff was widely used during the election by all sorts of people. I think perhaps the most widely distributed that I saw was a couple of tapes of Joe Biden that had been edited to make him look like he was a bumbling idiot. And they were successful in making it look that way, though certainly not keeping the truth. And the truth is sort of the casualty of all of this. It used to be that you'd argue that a video was not something that could be faked, but we have managed to prove that isn't true.
Yes.
So anyhow, why don't you tell us a little bit about what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dennis. Happy to be here and happy to be kind of back at Stanford. So the project is called Deep Reckonings, and I can talk a little bit about where it comes from. So for the last couple of years, I have been producing a podcast called Reckonings that explores how we change our hearts and minds. So every episode tells the story of someone who made some kind of transformation, from a deeply conservative congressman who made what he would call a spiritual conversion on climate change, all the way to a white supremacist who managed to transcend a life of hate, all the way to the architect of Facebook's business model, who realized at one point he was addicted to his phone and had a reckoning, and has since devoted his life to tackling technology addiction. So it's been you could call it a motley crew of characters, but the through line has really just been an exploration of this question, how do people change? And how do people change in ways that connect to or scale into broader social and political change? And from the early days of the show, I've had this kind of wish list of guests, of people and really public figures who I thought that their personal transformation would especially, scale into or translate into broad-based social change. When we think about, or when I think about social change, I think about social movements. I think about the civil rights movement. I think about, having to have large numbers of people agitating for social change. But, the question can also come up, well, who are the fewest number of people that if they changed, like if Charles Koch had a crisis of conscience, that would literally change the climate trajectory of our planet. And so I have this kind of wish list of guests, very unrealistic wish list of guests. And I was kind of fantasizing about this fake film I was going to make about Charles Koch's personal transformation and how it changed the world. And then I discovered the phenomenon of deepfakes, which I imagine all of you are familiar with. Deepfakes being, a video that can make it look like anyone is saying or doing anything, although they never said it or did it. So, me with my fantasy about this film about Charles Koch, I realized you could actually do this. You can actually put, have Charles Koch or have anyone have a crisis of conscience. And so I decided to do an audio prototype on Reckonings. I ended up going with the Pope. So it's an imaginary reckoning with Pope Francis. I wrote a script and I had a voice actor perform it. And I had no idea what listeners were going to say. I had never aired fiction on the show. And to my surprise, people loved it. And I even heard from survivors of clergy sex abuse who, knowing that it was fiction, found it really helpful to hear the imaginary Pope say the kinds of things that they would love to hear the real Pope say. So that was released in early 2019. So then it just became a matter of finding the tech partner and finding the funding. So Deep Reckonings, which just launched a couple of weeks ago, is the culmination of a years-long exploration of how people change. And it is a series of explicitly marked deepfake videos that imagine Mark Zuckerberg, Brett Kavanaugh, and Alex Jones having a reckoning. And it is absolutely explicit that the videos are fake, partly because I'm not interested in deceiving anybody, but also because to me, that's part of the power of this medium, is that you can know that it's fake and it still influences you. Like these survivors of clergy sex abuse, you can know that you're listening or watching or reading fiction and it still moves you. And the question I'm exploring with this project, or one of the kind of the key question, is, how might we use our synthetic selves to elicit our better angels? And just to conclude, the kind of like the two intentions of the project are, one, to we're all very used to the deny and deflect playbook in the Trump era, of how public figures kind of traditionally respond to credible accusations of wrongdoing by denying and deflecting. And so one intention is just to create a new playbook. To create something that's more beautiful and more powerful and more, you could say the more manly, and just more stunning than what we're used to, so that to make critical self-reflection look beautiful, and ultimately to make more room for ourselves to grow in public. So that's the first intention. And the second intention, of course, I'm working with a very provocative medium here, and also a very extraordinarily powerful medium. And I do believe there is tremendous potential to use synthetic media in not just ethical ways, but in socially benevolent ways. And so with Deep Reckonings, I'm also looking to kind of carve out and expand the potential of what we might call pro-social synthetic media.
I think that's fascinating. I think you're operating in a long-standing tradition of agitprop material and broadsides and that sort of thing, but with a tremendous amount of new media supporting you. The fact that you can make something that looks seamless is really very impressive.
Pretty radical, yeah.
Yeah. So how has this been received by the people that you have produced cameos of?
What did Zuckerberg say?
Have you heard from anyone?
I have not. I mean, my design challenge to myself, as potentially impossible as this sounds, was to create something that if Mark Zuckerberg were to see it, would move him to say, that's hot. Like that is the me that I want to be. So I very much, how possible that is, but that like my design brief to myself was to produce something that would of course speak to the critics of this person, but would also not alienate the person. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have not heard from Mark Zuckerberg. I know that Chris Cox, I had proxies for each of them because I actually would love for each of them to see this, but none of them are available on Twitter or very accessible in general. So for each of them, I identified a proxy of someone who people could tweet at to share this with that person. So for Mark Zuckerberg, it's Chris Cox, who's the chief product officer at Facebook and also a longtime friend of Mark Zuckerberg's. I know Chris Cox is aware of it. For Brett Kavanaugh, it's a man named Nick Rosencrantz, who's also a member of the Federalist Society. And he also happens to be a Broadway producer, and he's also pretty active on Twitter. So I figured he's someone I could get to who probably has a personal connection and has an affinity for theater. So I don't know.
What can you ask for? Yes.
Yeah. And then Alex Jones, the proxy, who's as unavailable, if not more, is Joe Rogan, because the video of Alex Jones is actually him, and Alex Jones has his imaginary reckoning on the Joe Rogan Experience. And Joe Rogan has actually kind of tried to get Alex to kind of come clean when he's had him on the show. And actually, Alex Jones just went on Joe Rogan a couple weeks ago, and people were up in arms because Spotify just acquired Joe Rogan's podcast. And so there's this question of, should Spotify like prevent Joe Rogan from being able to invite Alex Jones on, who of course, when he went on, was casting doubt on vaccines, was being himself. And so there's kind of this debate of like, should Spotify prevent or not prevent Joe Rogan from having Alex Jones or any other guest for that matter? But the deep reckonings, it's like, those are not the only options. What if Spotify and Joe Rogan could engage Alex Jones in a completely different kind of conversation, right? Mm-hmm. Having him or like letting him say whatever he wants and banning him are just not the only two options. And that's kind of
yes,
part of what I'm trying to explore, although that's how it's being framed, right, in the debate. So, yeah.
So you think this is really, in some sense, a new genre that you're creating of political messaging? That is, you're creating the world as it ought to be in your eyes, and presenting that with the actors of the current world.
And then that is kind of what is new here. We've seen plenty of deepfakes used to parody people, to make them look worse, right? And so yeah, this is an exploration of what if we use this medium to make us look more morally courageous or more whatever, envision the change we wish to see. I mean, I can imagine, my husband happens to be in addiction medicine, and I can imagine, working with someone who struggles with addiction to script, a deep fake of their sober self in the future, talking to themselves now, encouraging themselves onto the path of recovery. I mean, there's all kinds of, but yeah, that's kind of the area I'm trying to carve out here, is using deepfakes to envision and ultimately elicit the reality we want to see.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we can do something about global warming while we're at it.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
So materials you've done are, I mean, you're clearly a modern artist, which is to say you're on the internet somewhere. You probably ought to tell us where, because I think that people would be interested. I know that you have your infinitelunchbox.com site. Is that right?
Yes. So yeah, infinitelunchbox.com is kind of my very simple home. It's pretty much just a splash page with links to other work. And then deepreckonings.com is where you can find Deep Reckonings, the project.
Okay. And
Yeah.
then you have a YouTube channel as well?
I do. So there is an Infinite Lunchbox YouTube channel, and I think the URL is just youtube.com/c/infinite lunchbox. And but yeah, infinitelunchbox.com links to everything. But Infinite Lunchbox, the YouTube channel, is basically just a kind of a helping people kind of see this political moment in a way that is a little heterodox, like not quite in line with kind of what we hear in the news, a little heterodox and hopeful. So yeah, if it's I consider it kind of a heterodox and hopeful take on current events, on what's going on in this moment.
What I like about what you're doing is the fact that you're doing it and you're making your belief and your understanding of the current situation, what needs to be done, available to other people to see through the eyes of the people who are causing the problem or whatever. I think it's an interesting conundrum and a very I think a very powerful metaphor for today.
And I'm not even sure what is harder for people to swallow, the idea of deepfakes being used in a pro-social way, or the idea of not even just letting these men apologize, because that's hard enough as it is, like letting them kind of have their reckoning, but letting them like take leadership on precisely on the issues that they have, done so much damage around. So I think that's actually maybe even the harder thing for people about this project. Kind of what makes it the most subversive is kind of letting the tyrant be the hero, or really just transcending those categories altogether.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So how did you get the idea? Is it just out of the blue? You saw the some of the postings about make your own sex film or something, and
oh well, I had this fantasy of this Charles Koch film that I wanted to make, but I didn't know it was possible to do it. And then in 2017 I discovered it's like I had the idea before I knew about the technology, which in a way, I don't know, there's something a little comforting. I mean, and science fiction does this all the time, obviously, but there's something, I don't know, somehow comforting about kind of coming up with ideas of things we want to do before. It just makes it seem like our capacity to do it is really coming from somewhere. It's like, it's not just coming out of nowhere. It just makes, which obviously, we are creating these tools, so it's coming from us. But there's something almost a little comforting about the fact that I'd had that the idea it didn't just come from the technology itself. It's like we have visions of things that we want to do or inspirations to do things, and our capacity to do them kind of like catches up with the dreams.
So how do you feel about the the fuss going on right now about there are all sorts of things.
Truth.
The Section 230 restrictions on material, attempts to minimize the access of internet forums to people who meet certain criteria. The real censorship issues. There are people worrying about privacy and applying privacy rules to public figures, which may or may not be an acceptable thing. The ability to write things and present information on the internet is in some ways being challenged.
Yeah.
And is that a good thing or a bad thing? I personally think it's quite a bad thing, but that's an issue.
Well, yeah, why don't you lay out your position? I'd be curious to hear.
I think that the internet is and the Wild West that we have now is fine. I don't like the idea of censorship at all. On the other hand, I would really like people to be a bit smarter and function a little bit better.
Yeah. I mean, this is obviously could be its own many hours long conversation. I mean, I might just leave it as simple as, it kind of just depends on the goal of each forum. What is the goal of Facebook or Twitter or Reddit or 8chan or, any of these forums. And you just have to, I think there's got to be a lot of clarity around the goal. And then once you know your goal, then under what circumstances do we regulate what kinds of speech in ways that are conducive to achieving that goal? So, I think we can, I don't know, I think kind of Mark Zuckerberg, he'll make these kinds of comments about kind of like free speech, got to protect free speech. But if his goal is community building and connection, I don't really know what his goal is. He's got to get some clarity, which I don't want to assume he doesn't have, but
buy it.
What?
It's finding out what you want to buy and helping you buy it.
Oh, yes.
That's the real goal in some sense.
Yes.
And, I don't know, the degree to which you are surveilled for that purpose is fairly high.
Yeah. Actually, I'm going to actually quote the imaginary Zuckerberg here on this one. So This is directly from his imaginary reckoning. He says, the question isn't how to remove dangerous content while maintaining the widest definition of free speech possible, or whether Facebook should be an arbiter of truth. Facebook already is an arbiter of truth. Yes. The question is how to make editorial decisions that our users can trust and that fulfill our actual mission, which goes beyond free speach.
Yeah, well, we'd like to know what that actual mission is.
That's actually kind of a part of the next part of his reckoning, but I won't spoil it for people. They can go and watch the video.
That's really good. No, we're talking about signing up things. In a sense, one of the internet icons is John Perry Barlow, who wrote a manifesto about the internet, which basically was to provide a place where ideas are presented without any restriction, and that's always seemed to me to be a very good thing. It means the things that you would like not to be widely available are made widely available. And it also has shown that, at least in our society, people are much more interested in things that I would prefer them not to be interested in than they are. But to introduce any restriction causes major problems with things that shouldn't be restricted. I mean, for example, the word breast was at one point in somebody's should not appear list. And so all of the material about breast cancer and fundraising for breast cancer was all of a sudden removed.
Wow. Yeah.
And, similarly, there are tremendous impacts, unexpected, that have to be dealt with. So I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I think there will kind of always be little wild, wild west places. So it's really just a matter of like, what do your platform want to be?
Yeah.
And if the problem is that, like when we let people say whatever they want, we get a bunch of white supremacy and, xenophobia, well, then there's other problems that we need to work on that aren't going to be solved with, with like speech moderation.
That's true. That's true. Though
yeah.
The current situation in China is interesting in that there basically is a tracking on basically everything that you access in you're assuming you're a Chinese person, and you have a score that is goodness. So if you look at bad things, you get a bad score. If you look at good things or you say good things, you get a good score. And then the karma that you get in that fashion is used to determine whether or not you get to do a lot of other things. And the pervasiveness of surveillance is pretty good. And so things are really changing quite substantially in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether that's something which we'll adopt here in the U.S. or not. Certainly, there are people who seem to feel that that's a good idea.
That the surveillance is that
to keep track of everything you see and do, and make that available to determine whether what you're doing is, I don't know, quote, good, unquote.
Yeah. The question is always who has access to everything you say and do, and who is making that decision?
Yes, that's an interesting question. It's probably somebody you would just assume not, but that's a different matter.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's interesting that that at least at this point in time, you can do what amounts to a fictional recreation of somebody and their attitudes, and have them behave. Did you want to take do you have a clip that you could show here and give us a hint as to what's going on?
Sure. Would I guess so. I would share my screen. Sure. Maybe I'll share. Why don't I share the shortest one, or I can also just share the trailer because that's actually
I think that's the trailer. Probably is the right thing here.
Okay.
I think it. I think you can share your screen.
Hey everyone. I know the boycotts and resignations and everything were tough on our company, and I've been reflecting. And I want to give you an honest response. When we launched Facebook to the world, it was the glory days of social media. Social media was this liberating force that was going to democratize access to information and give everyone a voice. And the truth is we did that. We gave small publishers the same sophisticated tools the big guys had. And we allowed citizens to speak out against oppressive regimes. And we enabled people to be more creative and entrepreneurial. But the other truth is there was a bad side to all of this. The small publishers we empowered ended up including hateful propagandists like Alex Jones. Our algorithms fueled ethnic violence in Myanmar and Sri Lanka.
This is not actually the trailer. Sorry.
People on our platform have become more hating.
Okay, so let's try that one more time. Here.
Well, actually, I think what I was looking for was an exemplar, and this I think is adequate. It shows exactly where you're going. It's really quite impressive.
Okay, well, we can just leave it there, or I can.
Let's leave it there and continue the conversation, perhaps.
Okay.
The sound is remarkably like Zuckerberg speaks. How did you do that?
So the sound is actually a voice actor, although it is possible to do. I did not do synthetic audio, but it is possible to feed the AI, enough data, enough of the person's voice to create a model, and then you then just feed it script, and it says the words in that person's voice.
Yeah, I think the voice actor is better because you get perhaps more emotional inflection than you would otherwise. But,
That is one of the reasons. Although it depends with synthetic audio. You can do speech to speech or text to speech. With text to speech, this is all probably not as interesting or maybe it is, but with text to speech, you cannot control the cadence and emotion as much. But with speech to speech, you actually do have someone else say the audio with the cadence and emotion you want, and then the AI turns it into the person's voice.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When Microsoft first did language translation, Rick Rashid gave a short piece of his 380 talk in Chinese. And what he did is he spoke it to English. It was translated to text. The text was translated to Chinese, and a little Chinese robot who knew about how to speak Chinese spoke the Chinese for him. And it was fast enough so it looked seamless. It was quite amazing, and probably just as well that we didn't understand Chinese.
Yeah.
But it was really quite amazing. And some of the Google Translate stuff works in that same model. So it's also possible that you can have your Mark Zuckerberg character actor speaking in French or Russian or.
That's true, and there
whatever.
is a deepfake precedent. I don't know if you're familiar with David Beckham's malaria PSA.
Yeah.
That's kind of like a benevolent, I don't even need quotations marks around that. It's prosocial use of deepfakes to take a PSA that David Beckham did in English about malaria and translate it into, I think it's 8 different languages, African languages. So,
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And but it does lose something in the translation, perhaps.
Right.
But it does get out there in a large audience and conveys the information. And can, in fact, I think this is a mechanism for a political change, and is extremely interesting. It's almost as if fiction comes alive.
Yes.
And it's extremely strange to me that people have been worrying about the fakes in some sense, and the reason is that our little alarm bells that wave flags and say, "Hey, this is a fake."
Right.
Don't get triggered.
Right.
So you take your cautionary brackets off. It looks pretty real.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's we kind of do use kind of what we could call purposeful fiction in other areas of our lives, right? With the placebo effect. I mean, actually doctors say that the placebo effect is the most underutilized tool in all of medicine. Yeah. And or with alternate or virtual reality therapy, we can. We even though we know that the virtual experience is not real, and yet it can still help us overcome PTSD. And so there are ways to use what we might call purposeful fiction.
Well, fiction is a big part of
fiction in general.
I watched The Crown.
Of course.
Well, actually, I have watched children's cartoons on airplanes. Which have a great deal to recommend them.
Yeah.
It fits my my mental acuity on an airplane. But no, I think this is fascinating. Can this be done at home? That is,
Um,
are we going to see third graders or fourth graders doing it?
Eventually, probably, which is part of why there are different kind of deep fake kind of startups. Synthesia is one, Canny AI, and I think they're all kind of hurrying to make as much money on this as they can because they know that eventually it's going to be an After Effects filter. You know, so I think it probably will be in the hands of most people, of people who have access to these kinds of tools.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the time will come when there will be a little Zoom video of somebody running for fourth grade president class, and it will be a fake.
I hope I find out about it. I will be very curious to.
Yeah. Okay. Well, is there anything more that you'd like to tell us? I think that we have a good idea of where you are.
Yeah.
And, I got to say, I think it's wonderful. I'm certainly not in favor of limiting access to this sort of technology in any way whatsoever. I do worry about separating truth from fiction, but then this is not the only place that has
Yes,
to be worried
even
about.
if we eliminated all deep fakes, we would not have solved the post-truth problem, which to me is a problem of epistemological proportion. So that's really where we need to intervene, is at the epistemological level. I would say, it's time for the next enlightenment.
Okay. Anyhow, thank you very much. I think
Thank
that
you.
we're done. This has been a great experience for me. I hope that our audience enjoys it, and we'll have an opportunity to talk with you at some point later. I hope,
Thank
because
you.
this is not the last chapter of this novel. We've got lots coming.
And there may be, I'm potentially trying possibly to do a Trump concession speech. So if I do, I will let you know. Yeah.
Do let me know. I'll at least publicize it on our website as well, and
Okay.
maybe even link to it. Would be really a very nice thing.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dennis. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Okay.
Yes.